Hello again to all of you. It's great that you could be with us today for On the Issues. As many of you know, this is our continuing series of conversations. We talk with news and policymakers, people who are having an impact on this community in a variety of different ways. And today we are joined by the Commissioner for the Department of City of Development for the City of Milwaukee and a Marquette alum. Please welcome Rocky Marcoux to Marquette Law School. Commissioner, good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
In his bio, it describes Rocky Marcoux as a part bulldog and part evangelist. So I want to give you a chance to preach today.
Okay. All right.
Talk to us about the virtues of the city of Milwaukee. But I want to have you do that in this context. I've lived in this city a long time. I love this city. I know the same is true for you. It's probably true for many people in this building. We have some big challenges. We've got some deep-rooted poverty. We've got a foreclosure crisis in this city. We have sometimes, I would describe it as a fractious relationships with our suburbs from time to time. Given some of those realities, why are you so bullish on the future of this city?
Well, I think, first of all, if you look at the built environment that we have in this city, it is absolutely incredible. We have neighborhoods that are thriving. We have neighborhoods that are challenged. But within all of those neighborhoods, we have incredible infrastructure. We've got a city that, if you look at our manufacturing base, a lot of people talk about manufacturing as if somehow it was extinct, that it doesn't exist anymore. There's 168,000 manufacturing jobs in southeastern Wisconsin, and many of those jobs are right here in the city of Milwaukee. And that's something that's a core piece of what we are in terms of moving our economy forward, continuing to make sure that we have more manufacturers come in. That's a big building block for us, but it's not like we're starting from scratch. If you look at our infrastructure, and you may not agree with how many lanes are on the freeway or the fact that the freeways are where they are, but they're built, they're there. You name me another northern tier industrial city in the United States that has almost completely rebuilt its freeway system. It doesn't exist. Go to Chicago. I mean, you're in Chicago and you're in the Dan Ryan and you're kind of looking up because you're parked on the Dan Ryan more often than not, right? You're waiting for the next piece of concrete to fall, right? I have a daughter at Fordham and a daughter who graduated from Fairfield. Two great Jesuit schools, plugging the Jesuit stuff today, okay? But in New York City, 12 lanes going into the Lincoln Tunnel, same thing. Boston, I mean, with the exception of the Big Dig, okay? We have incredible infrastructure, but look at our city streets. We continue to invest and reinvest in the city streets. We've got a grid. The grid is our friend, okay? We can use that grid to not only grow development, but also to make sure that traffic flows in a way that serves the neighborhoods. That's why we've undone a lot of these one-way streets and gone to two-way streets. I look at places like the Menominee Valley, where people looked and said nothing could happen, that you could not do anything there. And you think about what's happened in a decade's time. And the land use plan for the valley is 1998, 1999. And there was vision, and then there was execution. We took the largest brownfield in the state of Wisconsin and turned it into one of its largest greenfields. Public-private participation, certainly huge amounts of money that the city was willing to spend. So why am I bullish? We've got a city government that's willing to invest in itself. We've got a population that understands how great we are. Look at the educational institutions that we have here in southeastern Wisconsin. Think about it. Now, I'm a Marquette grad, very proud of that, ad majorem de gloriam. But, you know, Alverno's here. We've got University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. We've got Stritch. We've got Mount Mary. We've got Milwaukee School of Engineering. I'm going to leave somebody out and hear about it later. But the point being that if you look at the thousands of young men and women that we cycle on a 4-year basis, not every region is as rich in educational assets as we are. Our human capital is tremendous. And then getting back to the built environment and, of course, what's in that built environment. If you look at the incredible culture we have in the city, the Calatrava is beautiful, the Osaranen is beautiful, the War Memorial, certainly Discovery World, all the lakefront assets, but it goes beyond that. It goes to each and every one of our neighborhoods. It goes to our communities, our libraries. We've got what people value. It's a value proposition we have here, Mike, that a lot of other cities don't have. And I would also add, Mike said I could actually expound, so I'm expounding a little bit.
I may have regretted
You may have, because we're only going to get to one question. But I think, and we'll probably get to some more of this later, but look at the population trending right now in the United States. People are coming back to cities. People want to be around other people. It's the natural piece. Jesuits have always wanted to be around other people, and that's why Marquette is where it is, right, in downtown Milwaukee. But we've got so many folks moving in. We have a foreclosure crisis like you talked about, and we'll probably get into a little more detail on that. But look at the population itself. It is stabilized. We're at about 600,000 in this city. No northern tier industrial city can say that. Cleveland's down to, I don't know, 3 and change, okay? They've lost 11% of the population in the last decennial census. I think the city of Chicago lost about 200,000. They absorbed them in the region, but they lost them in the city proper. We all know about the great American tragedy that Detroit is, 1 million people. How do you lose 1 million people? And so when we look at those trends, we're in very good shape relative to our competition.
I'm going to go to the foreclosure crisis in a moment, but one question on this. You've described a community with a lot of assets, and here's the question. Can we be a great city with the kind of disparity we have in this city? You know, you could talk about neighborhoods like what's happening on the east side or Third Ward or Walker's Point or Brewers Hill. You could talk about a bunch of different neighborhoods that are all flourishing, prospering, things are happening there. But there are big sections of this city where people are struggling mightily. Can we be a great city with that kind of difference in the lives of our citizens?
No, we can't. In order for us to be truly great, and I believe we can be the Renaissance city of the 21st century, but to get there, the income disparity has to be addressed in a meaningful way. I think the mayor has spoken pretty eloquently about this with the recent census data that's been released, and certainly some of the Brookings interpretation on that. What you're looking at is a disparity that exists between the suburban portions of the city or the region and the city of Milwaukee itself. Poverty is concentrated in the city. And we need a regional approach to mitigating that. And part of that is affordable housing in the suburbs. Part of it is transportation assets going to the suburbs. But a bigger part of it is getting more jobs in the city itself and employers that are willing to invest in factories here. That's what's driving us in the 30th Street corridor, the Menominee Valley, these other places. Our education system. Obviously, right now, Milwaukee is probably the epicenter for the grand experiment around choice and vouchers. I mean, we probably have more of that product out there than anywhere else in the United States, and have had it for longer than anyone else in the United States. And I'm certainly not. I'm not going to weigh in on that. Okay, it's an issue that probably takes up an entire series of discussions. But we have to solve the educational riddle as well, because we have to have an educated population if we're going to have folks that are capable of working productively in the manufacturing settings, because it's advanced manufacturing now, and that are going to be contributing to their neighborhoods. But if you don't give them the opportunity, if you don't provide that opportunity, then you end up with the same disparity. So I would say the answer is we can't be a great city until we've resolved that. We can't let someone else do it for us, even though we're looking for partners. So that's why, in many respects, we've taken it on ourselves.
I want to break this conversation into a couple different pieces. We'll talk about some of the challenges facing the city. We'll talk about some of the opportunities that are present for the city. The challenges. Today, the mayor is laying out his budget proposal. It includes about $12 million to address the foreclosure crisis, and I don't use that word loosely, the foreclosure crisis in this city. For people in this room, just take just a few seconds, if you would, and briefly outline how serious the situation is and what's being done to address it.
All right, well, it's a tremendous problem because it attacks core value in our neighborhoods. When you have a foreclosure, you have drops in property values because that foreclosure, oftentimes, particularly the ones that the city ends up owning, the reason we end up owning them is we take them for back taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, then we get the house.
You own over 1,000 of them right now.
Yes, we do. We're the proud owner. As of today, I checked it this morning, actually 999 as of this morning. So, yeah, and we've got more on the way. Now, imagine if somebody doesn't feel the property is worth enough to at least pay the taxes, and that could be a bank or an individual. The properties are not in very good shape. So there's, right now, you've got about 1,200 bank-owned foreclosures in the city of Milwaukee, and another, as Mike pointed to, 1,000 that the city itself owns. So there's about 2,200. Now, juxtapose that, there's 37,000 in Detroit, okay? And if you go all these other cities, we've got significantly more issues with some of our competition, but it's a huge issue for us because it cuts at and attacks the very fabric of the neighborhoods that we live in. So if you have a foreclosed house that nobody's living in, somebody ends up moving into that house, right? There's squatters, you end up with a crime issue. Now we're deploying police and fire resources where we didn't have to. in a foreclosed property that probably should have been demolished. We have, of those 1,000 properties, probably about 500 or so have already been slated for demolition. So it's not a matter of that they're going to be sold to somebody. They're beyond repair. They are in such a state that they must be taken down. So that's one issue. We don't have the money to actually fund all of those demolitions. The mayor took a big step, obviously. It's not like it's our first step. We've been spending millions on this. But the mayor decided that we're going to move aggressively. The Common Council was presented with the mayor's budget. The Common Council now will go through its process, and I believe the council will support the mayor's initiative. We need more help from the state. There was a $25 million that we thought would coming largely to the city of Milwaukee, which the governor decided to put in a budget. We did get $2 million from Governor Walker last week out of that money. We'd like to see some more of that. But we have to address this issue front on because of the valuation problems it presents. So if you look at houses that are reselling right now, so let's take our 1,000, 500 of those are going to be torn down. That means it's 500 that we're marketing right now. We sold 233 last year in the full year, calendar year 2012. Our goal for 2014 in the budget the mayor submitted to the council today is to try and sell about 350 of these, in the vicinity of 350 homes. That's into the neighborhoods that are already there, houses that are salvageable. But our problem is it's difficult getting the bank financing. Because as we've had so much turnover in these neighborhoods, the average valuation is $96,000 on these assessed homes. But they're selling. They're selling at the average sale is somewhere in the 50. I think it's about 54,000. So we're not recouping our value on the assessment, which means that then further depresses property values, not only in that neighborhood, but citywide as we get less value to tax on. So it's a compounding impact, and it impacts neighborhoods that may not have the foreclosure, but it impacts anybody who's paying taxes or lives in the city of Milwaukee. So it's a big issue, and quite frankly, it breaks down neighborhoods in a way that we spent 20 years trying to build neighborhoods up with home ownership, with doing catalytic projects, with trying to get individual block by block success stories to build into neighborhood success stories. And this has been a real issue for us, and it's an issue that the mayor's taking on head on, as is the council, but it's going to take more resources. And part of the solution, I believe, is more people coming back to the city, looking at the city as options, because there's a lot of value in those houses right now relative to what the asking price is. So that's a plug for buy in the city of Milwaukee. We've got some great properties for you.
Another component to healthy neighborhoods is jobs, and jobs that are within a distance that allows mass transit to be used or simply walking to work. How do you convince businesses that, for example, they should invest in the 30th Street Industrial Corridor, this area that used to be home to thousands of jobs when A.O. Smith was in its heyday? That's not the case today. How do you get business people to say, I'm going to pull the trigger, I'm going to locate something here, I'm going to create jobs in this neighborhood?
Well, first you have to lead with a plan. Let's use the Menominee Valley as an example, because the Valley and the corridor are very similar in many regards. The Valley had about 50,000 jobs in its heyday. The Valley had a great deal of jobs that left from some of the deindustrialization, some of the wet industries that left, obviously leather and meat packing, although we still have meat packing there, but we don't have it at the levels that we had. A lot of what remained, there were small pockets such as Falk Manufacturing, which is an incredibly value-added manufacturer, but most of what was left in the Valley was vacant brownfield land. City put together a plan. We coalesced around the Menominee Valley Partnership, which is MVP, which is public-private. We executed on the plan. The city's invested probably upwards of $150 million in the Menominee Valley. That's not counting the state and federal resources. But we got all the players to the table, and what we did is we created a value proposition. And that value proposition says that if you're going to, if you're a manufacturer, you need a number of things. First of all, you've got to have the human capital. And what the suburbs lack right now, what are the suburbs replicating at? 1.8, okay, and maybe 1.6 of the 1.8 goes to college. So who's working in the factories out in the suburbs? They're having some issues right now with that. That's why we're seeing more and more folks, owners, that are actually looking to the city because they've had workforce issues. And because we don't have transportation out there and we don't have housing, that's created somewhat of an imbalance. It actually helps us because we've got that human capital. We've got people that grew up in neighborhoods that were adjacent to our industrial areas. And that was kind of the way we developed the city. So in the Valley, what we had to do, though, is create a value proposition. If you're an owner, Mike, and you're going to invest $30 million in a factory, you're not interested in cleaning up $6 million worth of somebody else's environmental mess that they left. You're not interested in providing your own logistics to get to and from the freeway. You're not interested in cleaning up the recreational assets. Those are things you expect the civic entities to do. So that's what we did. For years, the city walked away from these properties, basically saying, well, we shouldn't be spending tax dollars on cleaning them up. We actually have gone completely in reverse of that, and we say we need to aggressively do that. We've got 98 square miles in this city. We can't fill in the lake, and we can't annex any property, which means every single acre of that 98 square miles has to be considered developable or redevelopable in some way, shape, or form. So what we did in the Valley is we went in and we took the Milwaukee Road shop site. We then raised it on average 6 feet. I think about 600,000 cubic yards of fill brought into the Valley. We created the Menominee Valley Industrial Center. All of this was contained in the Menominee Valley plan that was that the council had adopted. And then we kept moving. You look at City Lights, where Frank Giffrey's property is, which is where Zimmerman Design is. Coal gasification plant. Think of it. One of the dirtiest things that could ever exist. Burning coal to make a form of methane gas. It is now the home to over 120 architects and engineers, the creative class, right there in the Menominee Valley. So it's really about creatively thinking about what your assets are, and land is one of our, land and human capital are our two biggest assets, along with logistics, where we are in the Great Lakes. We can get to that in a minute. All right, I'm going to fast forward because I think I'm spending a little bit more time on this to get to the corridor. How does that relate to the corridor? If you look at the Valley, there was a plan. There's 6 different tax incremental financing districts in the Valley. Not just the Menominee Valley Industrial Center. There's City Lights. There's the Harley-Davidson. There's the Reed Street Yards, which is going to be, I think, incredibly successful. There's the Water Technology Cluster. There is the intermodal facility. So we strategically, as a city, took on the task of redoing this land and then essentially resettling it with companies. And there's design standards, sustainability standards, and then working with Menominee Valley partners in a very effective way, marshaled other resources. So you have the Hank Aaron State Trail that goes through. You have the river that's been cleaned up. MMSD was present there, DNR, EPA, EDA. I mean, it's like a government, it's like having, you went to heaven, all these government acronyms, okay, all coming together, making things work. But not spending money, not spending $2 here only to have $1 taken up here because we weren't coordinating. We were coordinating. Ergo, the 30th Street Industrial Plant, 30th Street Industrial Corridor. That's essentially, all right, you're going through the Valley, hang a right at Miller Park. That's where the corridor starts. Miller Brewing Company and Harley-Davidson at the southern end, then Master Lock moving north, the old A.O. Smith site, and then up beyond that, the old Kaiser site. So you can go all the way up to Villard. It's called the 30th Street Corridor because essentially the rail tracks that go through that corridor are at approximately 30th Street. So it's basically 27th to 35th from State Street on the south to Villard on the north. Within that corridor are thousands and thousands and thousands, okay, of potential jobs that could come back. Now, Master Lock is onshoring. That's a good thing. But what was prohibiting us from having the same success that we were having in the Valley? Well, you can't look at a 150-acre Tower Automotive site, the old A.O. Smith plant, which used to employ 10,000 people in its heyday, 3 shifts a day during World War II. You can't look at that and say, I mean, it looked like Dresden post-World War II. I mean, it was horrific. And it ran on Capitol Drive, and this was an advertisement, 150 acres in the heart of our city, and we're going to let junk dealers come there? Now, recycling has a place in the sustainability of what we're doing. So I'm not a knock on junk dealers, but we're not going to have 150 acres of the middle of our city be home to the largest junkyard in the state of Wisconsin. So somebody had to act. Private sector will not go into where these properties are because they cannot get a return on their investment. Companies that already caused the pollution are reticent to do anything with it. They don't want to spend more money, but it sits on their books. So the answer lies in the government, and this is an appropriate role for government, to go where the private sector can't go. So we went in there and we purchased the site for minimal cost and then did the cleanup. And we got about $43 million cleanup going on right now, almost completed. I mean, we took down almost 2 million square feet under roof. Think about what 2 million square feet under roof. It's just massive, okay? All of that taken down, probably I think we're at our 3 dozen underground storage tanks. None of this was something we didn't expect. We knew what we were going to go up against. We went to the council and asked for that money, and so there was a tax and criminal financing district. There was also direct levy support. So the mayor and the council made a statement. They put $10 million of direct levy support into it, which is our dearest form of tax dollar because it's what we actually spend money on to do things throughout the city. We've now created the ability to take the middle of that corridor, and if you look at it today, it is greenfield. It's like it is exactly the state that the shop site, the Menominee Valley Industrial Center, was in 2004. We've got it to a point that it's buildable. Now I can make a value proposition to you as an owner, Mike, to put your factory there. Because I can sell you the fact that you have a workforce nearby. Some can walk. Others can take the bus. Capitol Drive is right there, 27th and 35th. You can connect to any portion of the city using those routes. And I might add that when we brought Talgo to a renovated portion of that site, now Talgo is a train maker and they make exquisite rolling stock, just world class. 4 trains were constructed on that site by largely workers that live within 1 mile of the site, because that's what we said to Talgo when we come in. We want you to hire local folks. And if you walked in that factory, you saw 98% of that workforce was African American, and they were building trains that will run at 150 miles an hour. There's not a train track in the United States right now that can actually support it with maybe the Acela on the north portions of the Northeast Corridor. But they built world-class product from a world-class manufacturer with our labor force. So this myth that folks in the neighborhoods actually don't have the skill sets to compete in a value-added manufacturing environment is nonsense. But where there is a disconnect, I'm talking about people my age now, all right? So I'm 55. There's a lot of folks in the neighborhood still that worked at the Master Locks, that worked at the A.L. Smiths, that have those skill sets. Those Talgo train sets proved, okay, that we can bring people back to work in a meaningful way, and we have the skill sets to sell to folks. We have issues with our younger employment force where we got a disconnect there on the skills mismatch. That's something we've got to work at very hard. But look at Ingeteam in the Menominee Valley. We went to Europe to get that company. Why did they come here? 3 decisions that most companies make: location, quality of life, skilled workforce. And we have all 3 of those factors. We had the highest concentration of electric motor workers in the United States between ourselves and Waukesha County. That's a company that makes generator sets that go into wind turbines and transfer sets for the solar industry. They're a company that could have went anywhere in the United States. In fact, we competed against 200 sites in the United States. And they came to the Valley, and they're prospering in the Valley. And we have more Spanish companies that are looking at the Valley and the corridor now. Because people are saying, it won't work in the corridor, okay? It worked in the Valley. The Valley's different. The Valley was a neutral site. All right, some of those issues are correct. The Valley is a neutral site because nobody lived in the Valley, right? People live outside the Valley. But now we've connected it with Menominee Valley Partners and UEP. We've got 3 bridges going into the Valley. We've got the Hank Aaron State Trail. We've got more transit options. Eventually, we'll get a streetcar through the Valley. With the corridor, we've got the opportunity to do the same thing. 10 years ago, people were saying nobody would come to the Valley. I have people in my office saying, Rocky, we're going to build a truck terminal here, a logistics terminal. And I said, you know what? We need those in the economy. Absolutely. But we can't get 22 jobs per acre, and that's the yield that we need if it's going to be in the Menominee Valley because of the amount of money that's been invested. And we held to our ground. We held to the plan, and now you have in the Menominee Valley Industrial Center alone 1,200 jobs. There's 5,000 jobs in the Valley as a whole that have either been retained or created since 2004. And I am a big believer. You'd say I'm bullish. I am very bullish. We can replicate this in the corridor.
Let me, the questions are going to come fast and furious now, so.
I'll get shorter answers then.
Yeah. So you've made the case that the government has a role to play in economic development, and I'd like to explore this just a little bit further. What is the city's stance toward economic development? I've heard some people describe an approach, this is how they describe it: hug an entrepreneur, hug your market-leading companies. Are you doing that in Milwaukee? Are you making this a place where entrepreneurs want to be? Are you making companies like Northwestern Mutual, Johnson Controls, Harley feel welcome here?
I think we are. we spend a lot of time talking to the companies that are here because, I talked a little bit about companies we're trying to attract. But if you don't work with the companies that you already have, well, then it's a net-sum game, right? You're losing more people than you're gaining. So if you talk about Northwestern, that's a good example. All right, they just made a huge statement. They're going to build a $500 million tower, 1.1 million square feet, largest building under roof in the state of Wisconsin. They're committing to not only keeping the jobs that they have downtown, but growing that by 1,900 new positions over the next 15 years. That's an incredible statement of support for the city and for this market in terms of where you want to do business. Harley-Davidson, obviously, we worked hand in glove with them on the museum. We worked hand in glove on keeping them at Juneau. They've had some restructuring issues, but we've worked with them on that. We've also worked with small mom and pop manufacturers. Right now we're reaching out to every single company on the Northwest side in the old Northwest Land Bank, which was, companies that had been there for 30 years now. We're trying to figure out what are your issues, where can we help, whether it's workforce, whether it's issues around infrastructure, or in some cases, like direct supply, Bob Hillis's very techno-savvy operation, he loves it on the Northwest side. How can we help you grow? The entrepreneur space is something that GMC spent a lot of time with. The mayor's been working. Obviously, we got this Babson initiative with American Express. IBM is playing in that space right now. You have state government actually playing in that space. The Water Council, I think, is playing a role there. We have spaces in the Third Ward and in Walker's Point that I think are particularly well suited to this, but also if you go to the corridor, we've got an incredible opportunity with the Midwest Energy Research Consortium that Alan Perlstein heads, the former local leader of DRS, bringing all the controls groups together and talking about how do we get some common shared platform space for entrepreneurs and for startup companies. I think we've got this city was built on innovation and entrepreneurship. I think we've got to refine and rekindle that, because we're not where we need to be on it, but I think we haven't ignored it, and we're starting to move it forward.
There's some people who felt that had you been successful in luring Kohl's, the big department store chain, from Menominee Falls to the Park East corridor, that would have been a game changer for the city of Milwaukee. Thousands of jobs would have filled in some of that remaining land that exists there. Very briefly, can you give us any more insight as to why, at the end of the day, Kohl's decided to stay in Menominee Falls rather than come to downtown Milwaukee?
Well, I think it's a company that grew up in the suburbs, a company whose middle management and top executives, not exclusively, but many of whom live in the suburbs. And I think it probably was the easier decision, all things being aside. Kohl's was great to work with. They're an incredible company. Their leadership team was exquisite. We negotiated for a long time. And quite frankly, it's interesting. Success has many parents, as we know. Okay, failure generally has one, and I think I've been elected. The reason Kohl's didn't come downtown, that's interesting, is nobody even gave us a shot at even getting Kohl's interested in downtown, and we got them to a point where they made a very strong case. I would say, if that decision had been made today, rather than when it was, maybe it goes the other way, because you see how many young people are coalescing in the downtown. You continue to see the Modern is now up. You have all Barry Mandel's projects on the river, Stu Wangard. We've got more and more housing. But I think ultimately, in our game, the customer is always right. And the customer made certain requests. We were able to honor every request, and then it became a corporate decision. But I think some of it might have been driven by folks not still being convinced that the downtown is a great place to be. And I think what helps us with Northwestern Mutual is that puts that to bed. I mean, that really, really puts a nail in that coffin. And I would think that whether it's Kohl's or any one of the other companies that want to be able to attract younger professionals, the younger professionals more and more want to be in the downtown areas. They want to be where the culture is. They want to be in the compactness. They like to drop their automobiles. They'd like to have a lesser carbon footprint. And I think that we are competitive in bringing folks and keeping them downtown. I think Kohl's would have certainly, no doubt, that many jobs and taking up that many space would have been huge. But it also put a lot of spotlight on the Park East, too, in a good way. Not in a negative way. How close
do you think, how many years out will we see the infill completed in the Park East?
Well, a lot of people, I think, unfortunately, when the freeway came down, and we're the only city at the time the freeway came down, I believe we're the only city in the United States to take down an urban freeway without benefit of an earthquake. there was a political earthquake, right? It was a political earthquake, but without benefit of an actual earthquake. I think people just felt that, all right, the freeway came down, we sprinkle a little water, okay, like you're putting in a lawn, and all of a sudden you're going to get, 4 million square feet of space built immediately. Our absorption in the city of Milwaukee is based on our population. It's based on the number of people that are creating jobs and opportunities here. So to me, that was always going to be probably a 20-year proposition for when that freeway came down.
That was before the recession hit?
Yes, and then you add the recession onto that. So I think, now let's take a look at where the Park East is right now. East of the river, on the parcel that Stu Wangard is going to break ground next to the Convent Hill development probably next week. MSOE has done the Kern Center and the soccer field. Barry Mandel has done now the 3 buildings of his North End project. You had the beer line complete all the way with Michael Weiss's house, or homes, beer line homes coming right up to. You've got the Flatiron. You've got another Stu Wangard project, another Max Drummond project off to the side of that. You've got the Lackey and Joyce site in play right now. You have significant interest on the piece on Water Street that Opus, the county's awarded that to Opus and Mercy. You've got the MSOE purchasing now the Staybridge, which was huge. That was the only project that actually stopped, and major real estate project that stopped in downtown Milwaukee was that Staybridge. There were workouts, certainly, okay? If you talk to the developer of Lafayette Place and right. Scott Fergus, he'll say, well, it was a disaster. But those projects actually came to market. They're being taxed. People are living in them. Those were workouts. But MSOE now purchasing that, that's big. So then all of that's been happening, and of course the Aloft, all on the east side of the river, there's really only 3 sites left, freeway land, on the east side of the river. On the west side of the river, you've got a swath that runs from the 3rd Street MLK Drive intersection on McKinley all the way back up to the brewery. But look at what's happened in the brewery now. There's 21 acres of land that they forgot about, right? It's just Cal Manowitz came in, did the mess that he did, and it laid there vacant. You got Joe Zilber who comes in, and this is just nothing short of a miracle. It's now Milwaukee's newest neighborhood. Keep in mind that was a manufacturing site before. Now you have hotels there. You have the UWM with its School of Public Health. Cardinal Stritch is there. You have people. You have elderly housing. So you have restaurants. So people are live, work, play, and learn in that space. That is gradually filling in. They just broke ground on a 9-story office building this week there. So what's happening is, what's the east side of the river, we've jumped the river now with the Modern being very, very significant. Rick Barrett's development, the 29-story Art Deco tower. And then you've got everything that's going on in the brewery. I believe that now that is going to fill in. And to get us there, we've got to have total collaboration and cooperation with the county. And I congratulate Chris Abley and certainly Teague Whaley Smith, who's my counterpart there, and before that, Brian Tafora, and the county board, and the Common Council and the mayor. And now we're marrying ourselves to a joint marketing campaign for the Park East, which CAR-W is going to essentially run on our behalf. We're pretty excited about that.
Should any of that land be set aside for a new sports and entertainment facility?
Well, that's an interesting question. Where did you get that from? Let me weigh in here, not as official city comment, okay? But I will weigh in, all right? I'm not speaking for Tom Barrett right now, certainly not speaking for the Common Council either. But if we're going to make this public investment, and it's going to have to be a public investment as part of it, I think we realize that. And I think the mayor has been very clear that it can't be a public investment that is only the city of Milwaukee. All right, where are our strongest needs right now on that immediate corridor? Wisconsin Avenue, okay, has a lot of work that needs to be done, right? Wisconsin Avenue has some great bones. It's our main street. And I believe that the further the new complex gets away from Wisconsin Avenue, we hurt Wisconsin Avenue. And ergo, we hurt having a transition point into the Third Ward. The Third Ward is very successful, but Wisconsin Avenue should be benefiting from that. So I would think that we should take a hard look at potentially going on the footprint of the theater and the arena, where you'd put that new building there, keep the Bradley Center as the function the arena, the U.S. Cellular Arena now currently occupies. The Journal Sentinel block, get rid of that. Maybe keep a little bit of the Journal building. Well, that was nothing on the Journal companies. don't pick fights with people who buy ink by the barrel. But my point being, that's a developable piece of land. There's your downtown theater that we've wanted for so long. You could put the convention center right where it belongs as an addition. That's where it was laid out on Kilbourne. Then take Kilbourne Avenue, elevate it so it gets up to MacArthur Square, just like Grand Central Station in New York City, if you're familiar with that. Blow up MacArthur Square parking garage, make it twice as big. Maybe you've got another convention hotel now at 4th and Wisconsin feeding in all to this, and you have a huge streetcar. You have a streetcar intersection, you have public art, you have a bike share program, you have something for a lot more than just folks who want to watch an athletic contest. It becomes something that the larger community and hopefully the region could bring to bear. So to answer your question, to me, the Park East
Come south and sort of southeast.
Park East should build up along the plan, because remember, we took that freeway was not just a freeway. That freeway was a psychological barrier between the central business district and the African American neighborhoods to the north, particularly Hillside, Haymarket, and now eventually Bronzeville. I think we would be doing ourselves a disfavor if we were to take the wall that we spent so much time, money, and effort tearing down and replacing it with another wall, which is what a big complex would be at that point. So I say take the center of gravity further south, help Wisconsin, help all of the pieces that have been partially laid out. Now, this is going to get me in a lot of trouble for having said that, but this is not an official city position, but it's just thinking big, right? We've got to think, if we're a city on the move, we've got to think big. We've got to think beyond just one building. We've got to think of how everything else connects. As the valley connects to the corridor, as downtown connects with this corridor we just described to the central business district and the Third Ward and Haymarket and Bronzeville, that's how we grow vitally. That's how we grow organically.
Okay, we will note that those were the words of Rocky Marcoux, just ordinary guy
in his
who happens to hold down his day job as Department of City Development Commissioner. Well, yeah.
And ironically, coincidentally, on his last day as DCD Commissioner.
It's funny how that works that way, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Talking about big projects, I want to spend a couple of minutes. I have two areas that I want to get to before we open it up for questions. One is on this huge project that's been proposed for the lakefront. It's called the Couture. You mentioned Rick Barrett. He was a developer of the Moderne on Old World 3rd Street. He now has plans for a 44-story building that would go where the current transit center is. You all know where that is. Lincoln Memorial Drive and Clybourne border it. He wants to put a building in there that would have apartments, a hotel, a grocery store. This is a catalytic development in the truest sense of the word. Is that going to happen, or will it be bogged down in lawsuits challenging the use of that property for his plans?
I believe it will happen. If you look historically, where the city purchased the riparian rights from the Chicago Northwestern Railroad in 1913. And since that point in time, there have been successive legislative action to allow filling in of Lake Michigan to points east of that line. And that is how we have our park system today. You know, the average Milwaukeean goes down there, and even folks, and I have great respect for the park advocates, but it's not like God just said, here it is, okay? It was created by legislative action by the city of Milwaukee initially, and then finished by the county when the county took over the park system. That 1913 line has served us remarkably well, which means anything to the east of it, not a blade of grass is taken away unless it's a public building. To the west of it, it's developable. And so we think that that's really the basis for Rick Barrett and his title company, as he himself announced that title company is willing to write title on it. It doesn't preclude a lawsuit, but I think that the building has a lot of momentum. It is a gorgeous building. I mean, the Matt Rinka Chung Architects, they did the Moderne amongst many other commissions. It's beautiful, but it fits as well, Mike, within this larger piece that we're now moving forward with NML and with the Third Ward and the lakefront plan. I think the Couture will happen. I don't think that it's going to take a lot more hard work, but I think we've got exactly the right developer on this. Rick Barrett, no relation to Tom Barrett, he's hell on wheels. And he is a young developer who believes in this city. I mean, how many people would build a 29-story building in a place that most of the standard wisdom said it will not operate, it will not do well? He did it, and it's filling up. It's ahead of schedule. People said he'd never fill his first floor space. There's Carson's Restaurant, okay, from Chicago, in the entire first floor of the Moderne. This is a guy that can get it done. He doesn't understand how to spell no, let alone how to say it. And so I think I have great faith in his, because he's a project leader.
And this vision also includes there are going to be changes to the roads and the infrastructure in that area, the Lakeshore interchange. In essence, Lincoln Memorial Drive will extend into the 3rd Ward, which gives you a chance to do more in terms of development in the 3rd Ward, even that northeast part of the 3rd Ward?
In short, Lincoln Memorial Drive is extended. Currently, if you're driving on the Hone, when you get on the Hone or you get off the Hone, that's where the edge of Lincoln Memorial Drive is. So think now of Lincoln Memorial Drive continuing to go through, as Mike indicates, into the 3rd Ward. So it would be to the west of what currently is Harbor Drive. It will intersect with Chicago Street, right about the Italian Conference Center, and it will open up a new, it's like the Northwest Passage, right? How many centuries people looked for the water route, right, to the Orient. And many, many, many development projects have been stymied in that portion of the 3rd Ward because access has always been an issue. Now, the freeway ramps, which we are used to ending at Lincoln Memorial Drive, will be removed. They're going to be moved over. So they're going to move to the south. They're going to be nested underneath, essentially, the Hone approaches. That's where they're going to go. So there'll be a new freeway intersection in the 3rd Ward by Summerfest and a new Lincoln Memorial Drive that will connect. Also, a brand new Clybourne Boulevard. Now, those of you that are familiar with Clybourne in that part of the city are probably only familiar with it because you've made a mistake. You think you're getting on the freeway, okay? And you take a right, okay, just a little bit too soon, and it's like, whoa. That should be one of our most signature streets, and part of this plan is going to make it a signature boulevard.
Rick wants it to be like Chicago's Michigan Avenue. He wants it to be high-end shopping, 5 blocks from Water to Lincoln Memorial.
And it can be, because essentially you're going to create this new boulevard, and this is what the city's funding. So the mayor proposed, council approved as part of the NMLTID. We're putting $18 million in. Governor Walker put in $16 million, okay, to do the freeway portions of it. So it's a true collaboration. Of course, the county's involved because they've got infrastructure as well in there. We believe that Clybourne elevation, not only will you have let's look at this. This is the Couture, all right? This is the new NML Tower right here. I love to have objects. This is a brand new 750 to 1 million square foot footprint for a building that could be built as a corporate headquarters on the space where the 2 ramps currently are. So those ramps have now moved over. That's a 3-acre site that we could be advertising nationally for a corporate headquarters. So when Rick talks about that, he talks with passion, but also with validity. 833, which is Mark Ergen's proposed building, potentially is here. Couture is here. This building yet to be named and built is here. Boulevard, brand new, going over to Discovery World, Jim Shields' beautiful commission as that termination vista, and then Lake Michigan beyond. I mean, it's a generational opportunity, and that's why we build it as such, plus 22 acres of, sorry,
that's right.
Push you off your chair. I got to get back. I'll get back on mine. But 22 acres in the 3rd Ward that are mostly parking lots, right? We say susceptible to change, okay? They're not highest and best use. And think about it, it's millions of square feet. When looking as a whole, we think that's a 25-year build-out in total. Going back to the Park East, we don't want to oversell it, okay? It's about a 25-year build-out plan. But it's a generational opportunity because if the state had moved forward with repairing the Hone and repairing the Lake Interchange in their current footprints, they would have given them at least 20-year viability, which means none of this could have happened for 20 years. And bridges will come through the Couture over Lincoln Memorial Drive to access the lakefront. So now if you use a wheelchair or if you've got a stroller, bicycles, novel stuff like that, all right, you can actually get across Lincoln Memorial Drive. Aren't you excited? You live in the 3rd Ward, right? I
do. I actually live very close to that, yeah. So give me 1 minute on the state of your plans for a 2.1-mile streetcar route. Is the streetcar going to come to Milwaukee? Is that in your mind, are you going to be able to overcome the opposition to it on the part of some and some of the extra utility costs because you got to dig up Broadway to get at some underground utilities?
The streetcar is exceptionally, extremely, I should say, important to the ongoing development in the city and the downtown. And that's because fixed rail needs to be part of a mixed transit package that most cities that are thriving right now have some form of fixed rail. The streetcar is important for us because it's going to link developable sites with each other. and link parking assets with each other. So you might be able to come into the city. Let's say our plan moves forward that we just described for the arena, MacArthur Square. You drive in, you park at a very large parking deck, but you get on the streetcar. And that streetcar then amplifies your ability to get around the entire downtown. But it also telegraphs to developers, as we're trying to get people interested in investing in the city of Milwaukee, they want to know, they've got 30-year notes. A bus line could change tomorrow. The bus line could change tomorrow. It's very portable. Fixed rail doesn't change readily. And so that gives the advantage, and this is what Portland's found, this is what every city that has engaged in a streetcar. We need to get it in the ground and change the debate from stop the streetcar to when am I going to get the streetcar? Because we think it's that powerful an economic development tool and a transportation asset. Now, to answer your direct question on the utilities, for as long as there have been roads, all the utilities have been able to put their infrastructure in city streets at no cost to the utility. We don't charge for that. You as taxpayers, okay, are not getting anything from the utilities, okay, for that service. All of a sudden, because it's rail, we're going to get charged for moving infrastructure. If we were redoing that road as a normal road, the utilities would come in, they would take care of their stuff, we take care of our stuff, and we all move on. And we've done that for decades. So this is an issue that we have to take another look at on reasonableness, because, quite frankly, if we have to replace the utilities every time we do a streetcar and pay for it out of that budget, we're not going to be able to afford it. And I think that's part of the plan, right? So I think we've got to come to some middle ground on this that recognizes the economic development potential for the streetcar to the utilities. The utilities, right, you're all ratepayers too, right? And the more people that are buying electricity, okay, the rates can go down if we can be more efficient. The more people that use a mass transit system lowers our carbon footprint, and in some cases allows us to be much more efficient on utility utilization as well. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I think the streetcar is vitally important as an economic development tool to the city of Milwaukee. It's not a toy. It is not a tourist attraction. It is an economic development tool.
And you believe it will happen?
I believe it will happen.
And you'll be in the ground by?
Perhaps as well, that we have to go to the Common Council to vote on the next stage. They're in engineering right now, but the construction could begin as early as next year.
Okay. Let's take a few questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you're in the seating bowl. Just press down on the little rim, not the button, but the rim, and we'll go from there. Bruce, yeah, go ahead.
Just, there I go.
Right there.
I'm wondering if you would give us any insight you have on why Wisconsin has done so poorly on growing jobs from a development point of view. You know, we're behind all of our neighbors and behind the U.S. And is it just bad luck, or is there policy, or and how does this impact Milwaukee, your efforts in Milwaukee?
But I guess I'm not in a position to comment on Governor Walker's programs or even the legislature's programs. I kind of look at what we've been doing, and we actually have been successful. And I think what we want to do is extend our hand out to Governor Walker, as we have, and say, here's some things that we need to help us move the corridor forward. Here's some things that we need to have continued presence, not just in the corridor, in other neighborhoods, the Aerotropolis, the areas around the port, all of these places that are important. And we can grow those jobs for you because we can be competitive. I think the Valley has shown that we can be competitive. The fact that we were able to attract companies and continue to keep companies on the Northwest side. I think that Illinois right now has positioned itself rather badly for a number of reasons because they are not being competitive with their tax rates, and they face a huge issue with the public pensions that are coming due. The city of Chicago, state of Illinois, these are huge drags on their economy. The mayor this morning talked about we're the best funded municipal pension in the United States. And because we put money aside, we were good stewards, the county council was good stewards. I think that helps us competitively because we don't have that hanging over our heads when we're trying to attract companies here, because companies are going to look from this point forward where municipalities and state governments are on their pension liabilities because they think that that's going to project future tax increases. So I can't answer your question on the state. All I can say is I believe we are putting forward a very competitive not only locational opportunity for any company that wants to go here, but because of the workforce that we have And because of the density that is in our favor, I think we are being competitive, at least in the city of Milwaukee. We need more jobs. We clearly know that. I can't really speak to the larger issue at the state.
Let me take other questions. Frank, go ahead.
A few Jesuit theologians, I've never heard any of them say that heaven is filled with government acronyms, but I hope it isn't. But heaven is filled with a lot of good planning, and we saw that this weekend with the Doors Open Milwaukee. And many of the people that I saw there were visitors from other cities and from other places who were all extraordinarily praiseworthy about the most important comment I heard them say was how Milwaukee has been able to preserve its past. And yet, when you talk about development, there's obviously a tension between tearing down old buildings and building new ones, and where you do that. And how have you been able to, and what are your plans to do that enables us to preserve, for example, the beautiful city hall that we have, the central library that we have, some of the old office buildings, the Northwestern Mutual building, etc. What in the plans are there that would allow us to respect and to preserve our past and at the same time move forward with an attractive city?
Well, I think these are good points. A good preservation policy is a good economic development policy. And if you look at the brewery is a good example of that, right? All those buildings at Pabst, many of which have been adaptively reused. $29 million of city money went in to support the overall brewery project. If you look at the Mitchell-Mackey loyalty buildings, another great example of buildings that probably the largest example intact block in the Midwest of that type of architecture. If you look at the Hilton Garden Inn conversion there, which I think was very artfully done and really well carried out, we believe that preservation is important, preservation of neighborhood stock. We have a program that the council has put forward that preserves some of the tax foreclosed properties that we have that are significant within their block face, trying to at least arrest further deterioration there. But I think it has to be a mixed bag. Clearly, there's been some criticism levied on the Sydney High issue, but those, that's a chapter that's behind us. But I think it was necessary to remove those pieces. But also, we have preserved significant other pieces of the city, and I think it's important we continue to do that. At Doors Open, I was giving tours in the City Hall bell tower, and you imagine the look on people's faces if they've never been to that height, and you're exactly correct, and you point out the character of this city. The significant architecture that is here is unique to our city because of the heritage, the ethnic heritage of the city, its origins, and the craftspeople who built it. And I think we have to, wherever possible, err on the side of preservation, but not at the expense of a balanced approach.
Let's take other questions. Yes, sir.
Certainly, one can really appreciate what has taken place and what is being developed. One of the concerns I have is that hundreds upon hundreds of people come in from the suburbs, but they're not allies for the city in terms of the political support that the city needs to accomplish what it wants to accomplish. It's almost that the city has to do it alone. I'm considering a future past presentation here. The way the region was discussed, the political allies for the city are not outside the city in the current political climate. That's a strong statement, but how do you read what's happening? Can we do it alone?
But we can't do it alone. The city cannot support the level of poverty that is here by services provided to folks that need them and still do what's needed to keep the infrastructure moving and to take the calculated risks that are involved with the Menominee Valleys and the 30th Street corridors of the world. Those take city resources. And we can't do it alone. The mayor has been making that point. The census figures are rather startling when you look at our position of poverty vis-a-vis the relative affluence of the suburbs. So much so that, you take our poverty figures, and yet when you look at our MSA, we're about middle income in the United States. That's how much wealth there is to offset the poverty in the city. It is certainly something we could pray about. and do my share of that. But I think the answer lies in opening the minds and hearts of the folks that are making those decisions. And part of it is getting more of the legislators to come to this city and to see that even with its challenges, there's no greater opportunity in this state in moving the state forward than moving the city forward. And so we've got to get them of a like mind with us that what's good for Milwaukee is in fact good for the state of Wisconsin. And that's going to take time, and it's going to take patience. And I never stop. I bring people through the city nonstop, and for our friends in Madison as well as outside the state. But I think we all have to make that case, and I think we have to make it through our faith communities, and we have to make it in our block watches. And we need to also, folks, we got an alderman in the room, and they get lots of letters. The mayor gets lots of letters. We need to have the letters also go into Governor Walker and the legislators and say, in a very thoughtful way, say, here's what happened in my neighborhood and how this investment impacted and leveraged something, to get them to understand that they can be part of the solution. And I think the mayor, certainly what happened at the lakefront with him joining hands with the governor and the exec shows us that everybody can get along at times, that we expect politicians to be able to get along. Certainly the mayor and the governor are clearly not of the same mind on many issues. But I think on economic development, there's some common ground, and there can be more common ground, because at the end of the day, economic development is not a red issue and it's not a blue issue. It's a green issue, okay? It's about money, it's about sustainability, it's about the creation and transference of wealth. And if you can create and transfer wealth, you have the opportunity for shareholders to make money. So we've got to make the value proposition to the companies, and I think we've made some real strong strides in that regard. But everybody as citizens who value this space that we live in called Milwaukee, we have to speak up for ourselves and make our opinions known to our elected officials, because ultimately regional action is going to be essentially critical to what we do, but a lot of that's going to have to come from some leadership from Madison in that regard too, that it's okay to cooperate with the city. We need the city. City needs us. We need the city.
Let's take one final question and we'll wrap things up. I'll go to the gentleman in the back. Just wait a second. Ryan will bring you a microphone.
Thank you very much. Rocky, I know you started your conversation. You're fully aware of the real problem in the city of Milwaukee, and it's the black-white situation. Now, we've ended another construction season, and we did a building on 27th in Wisconsin, the soccer stadium, the water incubator, new hotel downtown. Nary a black person on any of those job sites. And here I am at my alma mater, 4 buildings built in the last few years, nary a black man on any construction site on this campus. I guess the question is, who is going to break this impasse in this city?
Well, I think at least one of your points, I think, is well taken in the sense that we don't have the conversation that we need to have around race in this community. Race is a huge issue for us. It has dogged us. Race, in many respects, racial disparity has driven the poverty statistics, because we all know that white flight created a lot of the suburbs and a lot of the affluence in the suburbs. We have more race divided communities than any other city in the United States, pretty much. It is a issue that we have to take head on, and I think. On the Northwestern Mutual building, which will have a huge impact, $400 million of construction. The company has agreed to 40% of the folks that work on that site have to be City of Milwaukee. 25% have to be small businesses. Many of those are going to be minority and companies of color and women-owned businesses. And 100% will be done at prevailing wage. These are the policies that the mayor has been consistent on when we've negotiated, and the council has approved TIDs. So we're proud of that participation. If you go to some city sites, you will see many African Americans at work. You don't see anywhere near as many as need to be at work, or Hispanics. And part of the issue is the government can't build everything. If we can achieve certain participation on projects that we put your taxpayer dollars into, then the private sector has to be able to respond in kind. And when they build buildings, they need to be able to make the same commitments. Because if they can make those commitments on an ongoing basis, at least on the construction industry side, we can make some headway. Where we also, I talked about the creation and transference of wealth. When we look at our history, and we look at the migration of African Americans to the city of Milwaukee, many African Americans stopped at Chicago, right, after World War I. So the Great Migration in Milwaukee didn't occur until really the Second World War, which put us in a situation that our middle class, that was based on great family supporting jobs, we had a first generation at the point the industrialization started in the 60s and 70s, and we started to lose those jobs. And we did not have a significant transference of wealth within our neighborhoods. And the only way that you can rebuild that is to get more jobs into the neighborhoods. That's why we adopted the Valley as a strategy. That's why we've adopted the corridor as a strategy. And that's why way back when we had the land bank on the northwest side. So we've got to get more jobs in the neighborhoods so people can have the employment opportunities. That rebuilds the fabric of the family rebuilds the fabric of the block rebuilds the family of the neighborhood itself. It ain't rocket science. It's how the city was built originally. It's how all high-functioning cities operate. And race has driven too much of what divides us over the decades, and we've got to figure out how race is actually going to be a non-factor. That's a big assignment for us, but we won't be the city that you talked about earlier, because poverty will never dissipate if racism is not put in check. And ultimately, the answer to that over the next 10 to 15 years is going to really determine what kind of city we leave for our children and our grandchildren, and whether we do attain what I talked about earlier, being the signature Renaissance city of the 21st century. Because if we truly are that Renaissance city, no one's left behind. And to borrow the words of St. Ignatius of Loyola, to be for others, right? And I don't want to go too far in my Catholicism, but to look back at others and see reflected God, right, in every living human being. That's what most of us believe. And those of us that don't believe in a God believe that in functioning humanity, we have to help each other. So this is about self-help, but it's also about looking deep into our hearts to understand how we as individuals can make those changes every day in our lives that impact then our employers, our civic organizations, and ultimately the government players that make the decisions that make change.
I'm going to wrap things up there. Before we go, I did want to make mention of our next event, October 3rd. We'll be back in this room. We'll be talking with the three co-chairs of Milwaukee Succeeds. This is, touched on this earlier, education is a huge issue, and we'll be talking about some of the efforts underway to make sure that more of our kids are excelling in the classroom. We'll have Mike Lovell, the UWM Chancellor, will be with us. John Schlifsky, who is the CEO of Northwestern Mutual. We also talked about them. And Jackie Hurd-Barber, who is on about as many boards as you could ever imagine. I think she's on 11 boards the last time I talked to her. She's a retired engineer and a community volunteer who does great things in this community. So they will be with us, and we'll have a good hour-long discussion on that front. We're also adding a couple of events to the On the Issues calendar. We hope you will check those out on our website at let's see, what is it, marquette.edu, law.marquette.edu. Check that out, and we hope you'll join us again. Thanks to all of you for your attendance and your attention, and thanks to Rocky Marcoux, the Commissioner for the Department of City Development. Good to see you.
Thank you.